This is Groove Talk with Froggy Style.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Groove Talk. This is episode 100 of the podcast. Woo! It's a pretty big deal, I would say. I wasn't sure I was going to do anything special for it. I was just going to post another old episode of the podcast, but then I kind of decided, 100 episodes is kind of a big deal. Most podcasts don't actually make it past like 9 episodes or something like that. So the fact that we've been doing this for over 4 years and we've made it to 100 is, I would say, a pretty big milestone. So we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit on this episode. And you heard Tierra Penner earlier a little bit, and she is actually going to be interviewing me.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm honored to be part of the 100 episode of Groove Talk. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. So I'm glad that we have been able to provide Calgary and surrounding areas with local music news and just let them know about bands and stuff like that. Like, I was actually kind of scrolling through some of the old episodes for Groove Talk, just doing some website maintenance essentially today, and just looking at some of the bands we've had on. There's bands that don't even exist anymore and bands that are still going strong, and some of my new favorite bands, and it was all there. It was all very nostalgic, and it was all really cool. So
yeah, that sounds like a good time.
Yeah, so I guess we're gonna do a little cheers to Groove Talk. We got our beers here, and
ooh, you can hear nice it. Sound.
It was a good one. That was a good one. So cheers to Groove Talk. And if you're out there listening and you got a beer with you,
crack it open.
Cheers to Groove Talk.
Cheers. Okay, so
wow, sorry, it's
good, hey?
That's interesting.
I like it.
Just for those of you who are listening, we just got some beers, and we're actually drinking the Big Rock Brewery Gausgetter, which is a Gauss with salt and lime.
It's really good.
It's actually very refreshing, yeah.
Yeah, it's part of their summer pack.
Yeah, even though it's December.
It's fine.
The summer pack was on sale because it is December, so we got it. Anyways, I'm going to flip it over to you, Tierra. Ask your questions, and let's get this interview started.
Cool. Well, first of all, I would just like to know what made you interested in interviewing musicians.
So I've always been like a really big music fan. I've always loved music. I've always dabbled in making music. I played the bass when I was younger, and I DJ'd and started dipping my toes into like electronic music production and stuff like that. So I've always been a really big music fan. Like, I love music. I love live music. I think I've been to probably over 100 concerts in my life, which is a pretty big deal, I would say. That's quite a bit of concerts.
It's quite a lot.
Like, I don't know exactly the number, but I would say it's over 100 for sure.
Yeah.
So anyways, I've always been a fan of music, and actually when I was looking at starting podcasts, the first idea I had was to do a travel podcast for these friends who were running a travel blog at the time. I had the idea while I was traveling in Costa Rica. I was like, wow, that would be a really neat idea to do a travel podcast. And then so that was the first podcast that I ever did. But I also was like really deep into like making music at the time and doing music production. And I was actually working with this guy. His name is Adam Masonette. He's also known as Otter in the music scene. He's a really awesome dude. So I was doing a lot of like collaboration with him. Like, I was making beats and he was rapping over top of it. And I don't know, just through that experience and kind of like playing some shows with him and stuff, I just thought it would be neat to do a show that was dedicated to like the music scene and showcasing the talented people that I know. So obviously Adam was my very first guest. He was guest number 1, Otter. Go back, listen to it. It's probably terrible.
That was actually going to be my next question, is who was your first guest?
Otter. Adam Masonette. I think it's actually Adam Leung now. So he got married. But yeah, so he was a very huge influence on actually why this podcast is even still going today. He was a huge influence on me musically and also just creatively. He's a really awesome dude, and I owe him a lot. And yeah, so that's why I started. I was like, I know a lot of people who play in bands. I actually didn't know that many people who played in bands, because I think after like 3 episodes, I was like, I ran out of friends to talk to who play in bands. So I started having to reach out to actually other guests and stuff. So
Yeah. So I know this wasn't your first podcast that you did, but in other podcasts you've talked about how it's expanded how you talk to people doing the podcast. So have you found that doing Groove Talk has expanded like your social circle to include more musicians?
Well, I mean, it definitely, doing Groove Talk is probably the reason that I actually got so good at conversing with people. All the other podcasts I do are literally mostly just with my friends. They're not with strangers. Whereas Groove Talk has almost exclusively been with strangers and people I don't know. So that's actually been way more beneficial than any of the other podcasts, because it allowed me to step outside of my bubble and become more comfortable talking with strangers and with people I don't know. I always struggled with that when I was, well, actually for most of my life. And it's allowed me to kind of realize that, everybody is very similar. They're all struggling with something. We all have challenges that we're facing in our day-to-day lives, no matter what you're doing. And we're all just normal people trying to do the best thing we can. And we all can connect on that very fundamental level, right? So honestly, Groove Talk has made it so that I have been able to communicate better with the people I know, and also communicate better and feel more comfortable in social situations.
Yeah.
And also, I guess it has expanded my, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it has, because I just remembered the original question. This is weird being on this side, but it has allowed, like, it has increased my circle of friends as well, and people I know. Like, the one that comes off the top of my head is Anthony from the Galacticas. He's a really awesome dude, and I've been on ski trips with him, and I've been hiking with him and stuff. And, it's always nice to be out at a show and somebody comes up to you and they're like, oh, hey, man. And, they've been on the podcast or whatever. So, yeah, it's a cool experience for sure.
Yeah, that is something I noticed. When we first started going out in the summer, like 2 summers ago, and we'd go to all these shows and everybody'd be like, oh, hey, Cody. Oh, I just listened to the last episode of the podcast. And I'm just standing there like, how do you know all of these like really cool musicians? But yeah, you kind of showed me that they're just people too.
Yeah, no, like everybody, it's something I learned pretty quick on, is that, they're all just people. They all just like people things, Nobody that I've really talked to has had like any sort of ego about them. They all just want to put out their artwork and get some recognition for it,
Yeah. Have you ever like really, really wanted to interview somebody and then not gotten the chance?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. But, anytime I'm cold calling people all the time, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I send them an email, and they either respond or they don't. If they respond, great. If they don't, whatever. But then sometimes they also respond, and then you start trying to plan something, and it drops off as well. So that was a lesson that I had to learn for sure. That, it's not going to work out with everybody. But all the people that I have talked to, I've been incredibly thankful to talk to. And I've been actually pretty fortunate to talk to some pretty big names, I guess, in the Calgary music scene. Like Misha and the Spanks, All Hands on Jane. Matt Berry from X929, he does a lot for local musicians. Graham Moseman was a real fun one too. I don't know if he's like as big a name, but it was real fun to talk to him. And yeah, so people like that, it's been cool talking to people.
Yeah. So I know you said earlier that you used to be a little bit worse at talking to people, basically. Did you find that you had to overcome a lot of anxiety at first, or do you still struggle with that?
I mean, I still struggle with it for sure. I still feel like I still get like pre-show jitters almost. You've probably experienced it. Every time I go to a podcast, I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. Like, why did I schedule this? Like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to go do the podcast now. And I'm always like a little bit down about it. But then I get going and I'm like, oh yeah, this is really fun and I enjoy doing this. And this is awesome. And every single time I leave a podcast, for the most part at least, if it was a good podcast at least, I have a smile on my face. I'm like, oh yeah, this is fun. This is why I do it. It's just a chill. It's a hang. I get to find out about these people. I get to talk about what they're passionate about, what I'm passionate about. Like, It's always a good experience for sure. But in the beginning, I would definitely say it was a little bit more of a struggle to overcome that. Like, I would always get pretty worked up beforehand, and I would actually like write out lists of questions that I wanted to make sure that I went over and stuff like that. But I found that actually kind of took me away from the conversation, because I would always try to make sure I'd be looking at the list of questions that I would have beside me, and I wouldn't be really paying attention to what the people are saying. I'm like, okay, what am I going to ask next? Instead of like being in the conversation and just like flowing off of what they said.
Yeah.
You learn quickly that like conversation is an art, and it requires you to listen.
Yeah. That is actually something I had to learn coming out of high school, because everything was all about me in high school. You know how high schoolers are.
Yeah.
I had to like actually learn how to like listen to people and not just wait for my turn to talk.
Yeah. And you'll have way better conversations with people if you listen to what they're saying and you build off of what they're saying and you go with it, right?
Oh yeah.
Like there's so many times where I'll like have a question like loaded in my mind, and it'll be like, you know, on the back burner, and I'm just kind of like listening to them talk or whatever, and I'm like okay, well, when they stop I'll ask this. But then from me listening to what they're saying, I'll actually go off in a completely different direction, ask a completely different question, and I'll never get back to that question that I had like loaded in my brain.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
So
yeah. So do you have any like tips or strategies for people that are anxious about doing things that they love but still give them anxiety? Like what are some strategies that you do when you feel anxious? Or like what do you think about?
I mean, I would say, like, especially if you're anxious doing something that you love, just remember why you do it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, especially if it's a creative thing where you're putting yourself out there, it can be hard sometimes. Like, there's many times where I'm like, have days where I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? It's so much work. Nobody's listening anyway. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through so much stress and anxiety for no reason? And then, like I said, I have those good conversations. I have those good podcast conversations, and it just puts it into perspective why I'm doing it. And I would say that, yeah, if it is something that you love doing, just remember why you do it. It's because you love doing it. It's not because you get recognition for it. It's not because, it's going to make you rich and famous, or you're going to make money off of it. It's because at the end of the day, you really love doing it. And if you don't love doing it and it's giving you anxiety, maybe stop then. But if it's something that you truly love to do, just remember that.
Yeah. I know you talked a little bit about some of the guests that you had on earlier during this podcast, but what would you say like your top, like, I don't know, like 3 or 10 are?
3 or 10, that's a pretty big.
Well, I don't know if you have like a lot of favorites and you could do 10 favorites, and if you only have like a couple that come to mind, then just do 3.
I mean, I have quite a big list, I would say. Like, like I said, I've gotten to talk to so many cool people over the years, and I found, some of my new favorite bands from this podcast specifically. So I guess some noteworthy guests that kind of stand out in my mind. Obviously, Anthony and Will from the Galacticas. They've been on 4 times now, and I love talking to them every single time. The first time I talked to them was like, I think it was episode 15 or something like that, so it was pretty early on in the podcast. But and then they were just recently on like episode 91 or something. Every time they release something, they hit me up and make sure that they come on the podcast because they love doing it. And I love talking to them because, like, from the get-go, we talked, and then we talked for probably about half an hour about Star Wars. And then every single podcast that we've done after that, we have about a half-hour section where we talk about Star Wars. So that's why they're like, and also, like I said, Anthony's become like a friend of mine. We go on ski trips and get out like to the mountains together, which is real cool. So, the Galacticas have been awesome. I mean, my friend Andre, who makes music under the Wolf of Transylvania, he's also been on like 3 times. He's always a fun guy to talk to because we have just like really deep conversations about music. And I don't know if you know Andre, like when you first meet him, you might not expect him to be like the most profound and deep individual. But when you get him talking, especially when you get him talking about music, he just like is so wise. He is such a wise person, and it's just like I love talking to him because we just go deep on music, and it's just never feels like a struggle when I'm talking to him. It always just like is rolling off the tongue and stuff like that. All the guys in radio that I've gotten to talk to, so that's Matt Berry, Graham Moseman, and Adam Camus, who runs the CJSW. They've all been really interesting and real fun to talk to because they are radio personnel, so this is kind of what they do. So the conversations were always, there was never like a dull moment. And it also was really cool to just get to know how radio stations operate, right? How being a host of a radio show works and like why they play the music they play and how just like the radio world works. Anybody who I've gotten to talk to about events, so I'm thinking one specifically, Adrian from Big Winter Classic.
Okay.
That was the first, I think, event person that I talked to, but that was one of the coolest interviews I think I've ever done on the show.
Oh, really?
It was so awesome, and it got me involved with Big. So after that first interview, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do some media for you guys because I like what you're about, right? So I started doing, I think I talked to him in early December, and then after he was on, I was like, okay, I'm going to do Big Winter Wednesdays, and every Wednesday up until the festival, I'm going to release a podcast with a band who's playing at the festival.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fucking work, but I did it, and it was so rewarding because I got to, like, again, some of my new favorite bands I got to find because of this one podcast and all the podcasts after it.
Yeah.
But it also made it so that, like, Adrian was so appreciative of what I had done, he gave me a pass all weekend to the festival. So I got to go for free, which was awesome. But, like, I mean, Gone Cosmic, Heavy Dive, Long Time No Time, Misha and the Spanks, like Future Womb. I got to talk to all these bands because of the Big Winter Wednesdays that I was doing, and these are all some of my like go-to bands now for sure.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And also Jenna and Jacob at Slam Festival. That was really awesome, and again, it kind of got me involved with Slam Festival, and I actually had a really big part in this year's Slam Festival, which was online. It was all virtual and stuff.
And
but
you did your first live.
yeah, we did the first live Groove Talk on air with Aruba, which was neat. And again, it wouldn't have come if I didn't just talk to these people, because I talked to them about Slam 2019, and I was like, hey, you know, just in passing, I was like, if you guys ever need like help with media, I'm available and I would love to help out, because I learn about these organizations and I like what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So I like what Big Winter Classic does for the Calgary music scene. I love what Slam Festival does for the Calgary music scene and Calgary in general. So I offer my services, and then I get like deeply involved with these festivals, and it's just such a good time.
Yeah. No, I've definitely seen that during these times of you just being like, you're stressed, but you're excited.
Oh, it's awesome. And it's like, it's a lot of work, but it's like, it's cool to get recognized for the work that you are doing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So like when these festivals and stuff like that reach out and they're like, hey, we need somebody to do media for us, would you be interested?
Yeah.
I love it when I get the opportunities like that.
Yeah.
I guess another couple just noteworthy guests would be, we could talk about, we could sit here all day talking about some of the guests I've had, but Crooked Spies were good early on ones. Free the Cynics, Rich is awesome. And we've done all of our podcasts exclusively in bars, so that's been kind of cool. I Am the Mountain, when I got to talk to I Am the Mountain, that was awesome because they're now one of my favorite local bands.
I Am the Mountain just absolutely pops off. I love them. They're definitely one of my favorite bands. Not even just favorite local, just favorite, hands down.
Yeah. The most recent episode I did with Dave from the Night Terrors was really fun because again, we just sat there and nerded out about music, and he was like, yo, I listened to your show, I'm a fan, this is a real cool experience for me getting to be on your podcast. And him saying that to me was just like, holy crap, I can't believe somebody's actually excited to do this thing. Like
that is really cool that you're like, You almost had like a fan moment.
Oh, I did. And it was awesome because it doesn't happen a lot with podcasts, right? So anytime anybody says that they listen to the podcast or they're like, hey, I listened to that episode with blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, thank you. Somebody's listening. Like, so, yeah, I mean, like, honestly, all of the podcasts have been unique in their own way. And there's maybe, I couldn't even count on one hand how many bad podcasts there have been, probably. The ones that I didn't think turned out well.
Fair.
Yeah.
Have those been mostly due to like noise issues? Or just like when you ask a question, then they just answer and it's not very like flowy.
Yeah, it more has to do with the people I'm interviewing. If they feel like it's more like an interview and they're not willing to have the conversation with me and willing to go on the journey with me, it's a little bit more difficult.
Right.
Noise issues or whatever, I can personally, when I'm having the conversation, can always get over noise issues. I don't know what the audio quality sounds like afterwards, and I'm sure some people just fucking hate it when I do like podcasts in a bar or whatever. But every time I listen back to those podcasts, because I listen to all the podcasts I record because I have to do an edit on it, every time I listen to those podcasts that have a little bit more background noise, I'm still personally engaged by it.
Yeah.
So I think that it's okay, you know?
Okay.
Because I'm still putting out a product that I would be interested in. And that's my goal, right? Like, I am trying to put out a product that other people want to consume, right? But I'm also putting out a product that I'm proud of. And even with that background noise, I'm still engaged and I'm still proud of it, then it's fine in my books.
Right, yeah.
Everybody's going to have different opinions on that. Some people are podcast purists and they can't deal with any background noise whatsoever, but I'm not like that, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So what are some like challenges or like hardships that you've come up against? Like, I know, for example, that this last spring, especially with the pandemic and everything, like you kind of took a little bit of a hiatus.
I mean, there's a lot of challenges that go with producing a podcast, and I'm not just producing a podcast because I obviously like to torture myself a little bit, and I've constructed this whole podcast network that I'm deeply involved in. I'm doing most of the work for. So honestly, the biggest challenge that I've had is that most of the time, and especially for Groove Talk, it's just me.
Right.
I'm the only one who's here. I'm the host. I edit everything. I do the videos. I do the artwork for the most part, if there's any unique artwork. Otherwise, I'm just pulling it from the internet. I do all the write-ups. I do everything, you know. I do all the social media. So that's the biggest challenge that I come up against. And then, you know, there's other smaller things like the thing that happened to me in May. It was trying to find the motivation to continue on because the pandemic was happening, bands and stuff weren't doing things. So it was kind of hard for me to reach out to bands and get them to come and be interviewed because they didn't have anything going on. They had no shows. They had no music that they were making. Everything kind of just went on pause. So it was really hard to come up with content. And I know I tried to do some shows that were just like kind of solo shows, and you know, and they were all right, but they weren't why I do this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They weren't me getting to talk to bands, and that's why I do this. So I just had to kind of put it on pause, step back, remember why I do it, and then continue forward.
Do you think that pause made you better in the long run, even though you weren't putting out material on a schedule anymore?
No, 100%. I definitely think that it did. It gave me perspective, and it made it so it just made me remember why I do it. And I've talked about it before, but I had this idea of like how a podcaster was kind of supposed to be, you know. They were supposed to put out episodes on the regular and blah, blah, blah. And this is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be on all the social medias and shit. And I was really trying to kind of live up to that expectation. And it was causing me a lot of stress, and it made me honestly kind of almost abandon the project altogether. And not even just Groove Talk, but all the other podcasts in the podcast network and stuff like that. And I'm super happy I did not do that. But it just kind of gave me the chance to kind of reflect on why I do it and how I would like to see the show moving forward. And honestly, I said I'm not going to release things on a schedule anymore, but the way that I'm releasing them now have kind of fallen back to that natural schedule anyway, which is kind of neat to see.
Do you feel like now, even though it's on a schedule, that you don't feel that pressure of like trying to keep up with the schedule? It happens naturally now?
Yeah, exactly. It happens naturally now, and I'm not trying to I am trying to keep up with it because I'm on a roll right now, and I want to I got a lot of stuff in the bank, which I like to have, and I'm trying to keep up with that, but it just happened naturally.
Yeah.
Because I was like just willing to put in the work in a different way now. And it didn't feel like work anymore. It like kind of reignited my passion for it, and it felt more like, again, that passion project that it was originally, and it still is. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that that taking a break did that for you.
And honestly, I must say that it was a lot of the stuff. It wasn't the podcasts themselves. It was the stuff that go around podcasting that was stressing me out.
Yeah.
Like the schedule, like the social media garbage and numbers and stuff like that. And honestly, I was on, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I was trying to do Reddit stuff. I was trying to do Minds, which was this new social media platform and shit. But I was on all of it, and it was just causing me stress. So honestly, I just stepped away from the social media aspect of it. I use Instagram now, and that is the social media platform that you can connect with me the most on, or that you can find me the most active on, because honestly, all the other posts on the other social media platforms just come from Instagram. And that has been a huge step forward for my personal mental health, and also keeping the love of this project going, for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Mental health seems to be like a big topic currently in like current events right now. And it's good that you found that like balance between having this big project that you do the vast majority, if not all of the work for, that balance between that and also your mental health.
Yeah, and that was always really important, right? Because this isn't my job. This is something that I do for fun, and I was stressing myself out over it. Which was not healthy and not good in the long run, right? So, yeah, it was finding that balance, really. And would I love to do this professionally? Obviously, it would be a dream come true if I could do this professionally, and if I could sink the proper amount of time into it.
Yeah.
That I would like to, but I can't. But I still enjoy doing it, and I still want to enjoy doing it. So yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you find bands to interview? Do you just like go and like do like random deep dives into people's Instagrams or Facebooks and be like, oh, they follow this person who follows this person. Hey, this is a band I haven't heard of.
Personally, it's mostly through what people are doing on social media. So if they're active, if they're playing a lot of shows, or they have like an album coming out soon, they're usually on my radar.
Okay.
Especially if they have music coming out, or they're releasing an EP or an album, because they're more likely to want to come on the podcast because they're promoting something then, right? It's the same if they have a big show coming up or something like that. But it's mostly through social media and seeing that they're active in the music scene, they're active on social media, and they are doing things.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And then like it's about the music after, right? It's after I kind of discover them. And if they agree to be on the show even, then that's when I kind of delve into their music a little bit. So yeah, it's honestly probably 90% of it is just purely through social media and seeing, are they playing a lot of shows? Do they have something coming out or something like that? So
fair. And I guess currently it's more, do they have things coming out rather than playing the show?
Yeah, and are they still just active on social media, right?
Right.
Because a lot of bands have either not made it through this pandemic or just have gone on complete hiatus until shows start up again. Because a lot of bands, especially at the local level, are doing it to play the shows and have a good time, right?
Yeah.
There's like maybe only 25% of the bands in the local music scene are actually trying to take a legitimate swing at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
That's fair. So how do you find the balance between podcasts and like your personal life?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, this is something that I enjoy doing. So I really just kind of listen to what my gut tells me, I guess. Do I need to take some time off and just chill and maybe watch something on Netflix or play video games or whatever? And if my gut is telling me yes, then I do that. Do I need to get some work done? Do I have something coming out right away? If the answer is yes, then I try and do that. But I just really try to listen to kind of what my gut is telling me, I guess. And I mean, I'm pretty fortunate because I get 2 half-an-hour breaks at work, and I've pretty much dedicated all that working time to editing podcasts, right? So on my breaks, I sit there and I eat lunch and I edit podcasts and stuff. And that's been very, very beneficial for me because because I'm in that work mindset anyway. I'm in that get stuff done mindset anyway. So, yeah, but when it comes to at home, it's just very much listening to my gut, Sometimes I can delve into it and I can just hammer out some shit in like an hour, 2 hours, and then it's done or whatever. But sometimes I have those days where I just really need to, not do anything and maybe watch Netflix or play video games or something. It's all just like listening to my body, my mental state, and like my gut.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Have you found any like conflict in that area, or you're pretty good about it?
I mean, obviously, there's always going to be conflict, I feel. I mean, sometimes you're going to push yourself too hard in one direction or the other, right? It's all about finding that balance. Sometimes you're not doing enough, and sometimes you're doing too much. It's finding the balance, so.
Yeah. So, completely off topic, have you had very many bands contact you wanting to be on the show? I know you said that Anthony does when his band is releasing something, but do you find other bands also contact you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Dave from the Night Terrors, he contacted me actually, and actually got hooked up with this guy called from Asher Media Relations. He's I think a metal music promoter or media specialist out of Quebec, but he used to shoot me emails all the time with, hey, I have this band coming through Calgary, do you want to interview them or whatever? And I've had a couple other bands reach out to me and just send me their stuff. And usually, honestly, if you email me and you're like, hey, can I be on your podcast? I think pretty much 100% of the time, the answer has been yes. And they have been on the podcast. Science is Fiction is one of the people who reached out to me. Elf reached out to me. Again, that was just public. Their like media specialist person reached out to me and like, can they be on your podcast? And I was like, yeah, sure. So, I mean, if you reach out to me and you want to be on the show, chances are I'm going to say yes.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, people do reach out for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what you just said sounds like you also interview bands that aren't from Calgary.
Yeah, so, I mean, if there's a touring band coming through, for sure, and if they want to be on the podcast, I'll have them on the podcast for sure. It's not exclusively a local music podcast. It's just easier to do local musicians because I live in Calgary, and I really like doing in-person interviews over like online or Skype interviews. I feel like you can just... There's something about in-person interviews that feel more personable, and you feel like the conversation gets going in more interesting places because you're not worried about cutting people off in a weird way or talking over each other and stuff. Like, it still happens, but it's more natural and it can be avoided easier because you have all those social cues from being in the same room with people. But I feel the one band that reached out to me, or did I reach out to them? I don't remember. Anyways, the Faps, they're from Saskatoon or Moose Jaw or something like that. They're the one touring band so far that I've had on the podcast.
That's still pretty cool.
Yeah. I've talked to some bands from like Ontario, Montreal, and I've actually even talked to a band from England. but those were more like bonus episodes, phone conversations, which I'm not a fan of doing at all. I've done a couple phone conversation like podcasts or interviews, and I hate it. It sounds so much like an interview, and I hate that fact. And I try to make this feel like a conversation that you're in the room for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of like an interview. So it's really hard to do that over the phone. So I really hate phone interviews and conversations. Like,
Do you think that maybe that's also part of the reason that you kind of took a little bit of a break? Because we couldn't have people in our house, and you don't really like to do the phone or the Skype or whatever.
yeah, that is part of the reason for sure. And like I said, the other part was just people weren't doing anything and they weren't interested in being interviewed about their musical projects that they weren't doing, you know? So I've since have actually become pretty good at doing Skype or over the internet. I don't even use Skype, so it's not Skype interviews, but Google Hangouts interviews or whatever. The one with the Night Terrors was done online. I'm releasing one in January with Kate Stevens. That was all done online as well. So I've gotten better at doing those. And part of my hesitation about online interviews was just the technological capabilities that I have, because my laptop is old as shit. So I had to figure out a way that I could still get the audio quality from the recording on my laptop without... so I had to figure out how to do the online interview basically not through my laptop. So basically all I do is I do the interview on my phone and I record my part through my laptop, and I just get my guest to also record their part.
That's fair.
And then they send me the audio and then I splice it together. And that kind of got around the problem of me having a shitty laptop. So
does the editing for those types of interviews take a lot longer?
It can take a little longer, yeah. It depends. It depends on a lot of things. Some of the editing process goes off without a hitch. It's just like listening to the podcast again, and some require a heavier edit. It depends on, kind of silences and technological issues. Like sometimes there's audio glitches, again, just from me having a shitty old laptop. So I try to edit all those out. And sometimes it's easy to edit it out, and sometimes it happens right in the middle of an important point that these people are trying to make, and it's like, sometimes you have to leave them in at that point. But
yeah.
So some do require a little bit more of a heavy edit than others, but for the most part, it's just like, it maybe takes me an extra 15 minutes to an hour, like listening back to the recording. So it's like the recording time plus 15 minutes to an hour.
Right.
So they don't get a very huge edit, I would say. It's mostly just to get out, like I said, audio glitches and flubs and stuff like that. So
that's fair, yeah.
Yeah. There's never any censorship. I would like to say that. It's never... The edit never happens based on anything anybody has ever said. I never censor anybody. I let everybody get their points out and across, and that will always be something that I will feel inclined to do, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a good policy to go by.
Mm.
Yeah. So do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with your listeners?
I mean, the only thing I guess I would like to touch on is, I guess, kind of how Groove Talk got its name. I guess maybe if you don't know this, it's kind of a treat. But when I was starting the podcast, I actually picked Groove Talk purely based off of Star Talk Radio. I don't even listen to that podcast, but I just thought that like Groove Talk and Star Talk were like, is like a cool podcast name. So actually the first logo, I guess, podcast logo that I had it said Groove Talk, and it was just basically a black background with a bunch of white dots on it to kind of imitate like Star Talk, because that's where I took the inspiration for the name. So for the first 10 episodes or so, that was the logo, and it was pretty hilarious.
Maybe for this episode you should just put that old logo up.
I don't even have it anymore, to be honest with you. It's just, I don't even know where to find it. If you want to see it, honestly, you can go to episode 1 or 1 to 5. The picture for the episode is that old logo. So
Nice.
if you do want to check it out, you can. It's on the internet. It's bad because it was made, I think, in MS Paint. So, yeah. But I guess I should just say thank you to all the people who have really wanted to contribute to the podcast, because I've had help with, like, logos and artwork and stuff like that. And so a big thank you to all the people who do reach out and do want to contribute, because it means a lot. Because it's hard to do all the things on your own, especially when I'm not very like graphic design inclined or whatever. So that's the part I struggle with the most, I would say. So anybody who offers up their services in that aspect, in that regards, it's a huge thank you and a huge like weight off my shoulders. Especially also actually when bands provide me with like a media package that contains like artwork and their most recent songs and maybe their most recent music video and like the links to all their social media and stuff like that. That is so helpful. I cannot like iterate how helpful that is. And if every band could provide me with that when they came on for the podcast, that would be amazing. And just, I guess, a tip to any band out there who wants to take a real swing at things: have a media package. It will make the media love you so much more, and they will be in your corner. And if the media is in your corner, you're going to get more exposure. It's like having a free person out there advocating for you who has their own platform. That's so invaluable. But it's like media packages make such a huge difference on that. So like, honestly, if you're a new band or a young band and you're like trying to take a swing at this music thing, come up with like just a tiny media package. Anything, honestly, it helps so much.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been a pretty cool episode, seeing as the 100th episode.
Yeah, 100 episodes is a pretty big deal, like I said. So I hope that, I don't know, I hope that you got a little bit more background information into like how things work here at Groove Talk. I really kind of wanted you, the listener, to get a behind the scenes, I guess, look for this 100th episode. And I would just like to say that I'm really excited for what next year has in store for me. This 100th episode is coming out in December of 2020, so it's the end of the year. I thought it would be really fun to end it off on episode 100, and we're going to continue forward into 2021, and we're coming in strong. We already have the 2 podcasts scheduled for the January release. We'll be talking to Kate Stevens, and we'll also be talking to Ben and Ben from the YYC Basement Sessions podcast. So that was a pretty fun conversation. So yeah, I'm really excited for what 2021 has in store for Groove Talk and all the other podcasts that I am involved with. And this was cool.
Yeah. Actually, since we're talking about all the other podcasts, what other podcasts do Froggy Style do? Does the network Froggy Style Productions do? That was really hard. That was harder than it should have been.
So yeah, I guess I should maybe clear this up, because on social media I mostly post under Froggy Style Productions. So Froggy Style Productions is the podcast network. It includes podcasts such as Groove Talk, such as This Is Your Brain on Podcasts, and we will be adding possibly 2 or 3 more podcasts in the new year. We have The Last Podbender, which will be coming out on February 1st of 2021. That is a podcast about Avatar: The Last Airbender. We also will have In a Galaxy Not So Far Away coming out on May 4th of 2021, and that is a podcast about Star Wars. And then we are also looking to add a podcast called Marvel at Us, and not sure exactly on the release date of that one, but that'll be a podcast about Marvel. So a lot of pop culture podcasts coming in the year 2021. But yeah, I guess I should clear that up. Froggy Style Productions is the podcast network. Groove Talk is the podcast. I am the host of Groove Talk, and I also run Froggy Style Productions, so it gets kind of confusing a little bit, but that is how I have laid it out, because that's how I wanted to do it. So
Yeah, it's a very sleek system you got.
it's taken some time to get there for sure. It's gone through many different iterations of things, and I guess just a little background information on that is I used to make music. I used to DJ under the pseudonym? No, maybe not. The alias of Froggy Style. I used to be Froggy Style. And when I started doing podcasts, I already had like 50 followers or so on Facebook. So I was like, instead of making a whole new Facebook thing, let's change this over to Froggy Style Productions. And then I started releasing the podcast through that Facebook page. And yeah, so that's kind of why I stuck with it, and maybe why it's a little confusing. But I've grown it into something that I am proud of, and I like the freedom that kind of doing it the way I did gave me, because it gave me the freedom to add podcasts to an already established network with an already established audience.
Yeah, that was cool. Sorry, just to backtrack a little bit. Do you not also have another podcast that is only available to Patreons?
To patrons on Patreon? Yeah, I guess we can go through that too. If you would like to support Froggy Style Productions or the podcast that we do, you can do so at patreon.com/FS Productions. FS Productions, Froggy Style Productions. That's why it's FS Productions, because Froggy Style. Anyways, so all the money that gets given to the podcast network is used directly to add new podcasts, improve on old podcasts, and stuff like that. But as a reward through Patreon, if you are a $3 a month donor, you do gain access to a bonus podcast. It's called the Anarchist Book Club. And basically all it is it's short stories, and we're actually going to be getting into some like more audiobook style stuff as well through it. But it's a bi-monthly podcast, so you get 2 podcasts a month, and it's either a short story or like a chapter from a book or something. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, you can check out our Patreon page.
Yeah, I think that was all the stuff.
Yeah. Also, like, all the links for that will be in the episode notes. If you donate $1 a month, you get early, unedited, and ad-free access to all the shows that get released through Froggy Style Productions. So that includes this show, Groove Talk, and usually those get posted up to a month in advance. So if you want to listen to the show first and you want to listen to it without ads and you don't want any edit out on it whatsoever, all I do to the shows that get posted through Patreon is I make sure that the audio quality is good, but I don't do an edit on it. So if you're interested in that, that's $1 a month, $3 a month. Like I said, you get that bonus podcast and all the other the early access to the episodes. And if you're a big spender and you want to give me $5 a month, or you want to give the podcast network $5 a month, you get a personal shout out at the beginning of each episode of every podcast that gets released through Froggy Style Productions. You probably heard it on this episode. So if you would like to be one of those people who has their names read, you can do so.
Cool.
Yeah. So again, I guess just a big thank you to you, Tierra, for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, no, this was actually really cool. I'm like very honored that I get to be on the 100th episode. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty big milestone. I never thought that it would go this far, and we'll be getting into our 5th year of production in the year 2021. Wow. So that's a pretty big deal. I'm glad that I've stuck with it.
Well, cheers to you and the podcast network.
Yeah, another cheers, and check out Groove Talk in the future, and also check out some of the other podcasts that are on the Froggy Style Productions network, because they're all good in their own way, and I'm very excited for some of the new ones that will be coming out. So
yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, so check out those, and thank you to you, the dear listener, for sticking it out with us and giving feedback and leaving ratings and reviews on the podcast apps and stuff like that. And especially to the people who do donate through Patreon. You guys are awesome. So I never thought that anybody would be willing to give me anything or do, like, I just thought I was doing this to nobody. So it's an honor, and I know I say it a lot, but it actually means the world to me when people comment or leave ratings and reviews or are willing to go that extra mile and just tell me that they listen to the show. It means a lot. So thank you very much to you, dear listener. I would not be doing this if it was not for you. So thank you very much.
Cool.
Cool. If you like this episode of Groove Talk, why not leave a review? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Help us break through those evil algorithms and reach the most amount of glorious listeners that we possibly can. For up-to-date information on the show, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can find us at Froggy Style Productions. For more ways to support the show, visit fsproductions.ca.